Okay, so in this section, we're going to take a look at a concept called animation offsets. Now, what is the idea of an animation offset? Well, first off, we have to understand this from the idea of sort of stiffness. If we take a look at this animation I've set up, you'll see that this animation starts and ends at the same frame. Now, we explored how moving holds can help this with things like jitters in the body, but things generally don't start and end at the exact same time. The idea is at the source of energy is where everything kind of begins to move. So if we had a stick, for example, or an antenna, let's use an antenna, and we were to move this forward, what would happen is the first thing that would happen is the base would bend. So you'd see the bend here first. And then as it progresses forward more, you'd see the midsection start to bend. So this would be the first bend. This here would be something like the second. And then finally, as it moves forward a lot, you'd finally see that top arc bend. And that would be our third segment. And the idea is the energy is kind of moving through this object and pushing it. Now, we can try and eyeball this, but an easier way to do this is to do something called an offset, and that's where you offset one part from another. So, for example, the shoulder would start before the wrist or the elbow. So the shoulder would move first here. We could highlight all of its keyframes, and we could move them backwards, let's say one frame. But in this case, to make it more dramatic so you can really see it, I'm going to move it back about 4 frames. So that way it's very noticeable, and you'll see the shoulder starts to move before anything else, and it ends before anything else. We can further offset this by pushing things away from each other. So the elbow's already kind of set up in the middle. We could then take the wrist here, and we could take the wrist and move it forward 4 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it finishes 4 frames after everything else. And what you'll see now is you get a more fluid motion where they don't begin and end at the same time. Now let's make that even more dramatic so you can see it. I'm going to move this 4 more frames on the shoulder and 4 more frames on the wrist. So the offset between these is 8. And what you should see now is the shoulder clearly starts before everything else, and it finishes before everything else. Whereas the wrist is the final thing to go. It starts after everyone else and then finishes after everyone else. So that's the idea with an animation offset, and it really helps break up the animations, and it's great for things like the limbs. So what we're going to do is we're going to try applying this to our scene file, but this is the idea behind animation offsets. Rather than keyframing this by hand, we do it using the graph editor. If I select these as well, you'll see something neat in here. Where we originally only had 1 keyframe, you'll see now we have several along our timeline. Like I said, we could manually do this, or we could just do this using this method here by dragging on the graph after everything's said and done. So let's go ahead and try applying this to our actual scene and implement this concept. But that is the idea of animation offsets, where you take keyframes where every body part's been set on the same frame, and then you just offset them slightly to add a bit more life to your animation and create that nice overlapping action and give it a bit more energy. All right, so we're going to try adding in animation offsets to this scene so not everything's moving at the same time. Now, we have to make some identifying areas to really set some ground rules, because when you're doing offsets, you can screw things up pretty good. First thing is what can't have an offset on it, meaning what is dependent on the thing's timing. And in this particular instance, it is actually the wrist. So the wrist is dependent on the grab and the constraint. So we don't want the wrist to have any offsets. And when it comes to the wrist and the fingers, they aren't going to have any changes after the grab. So we could mark that grab as an area where it is sort of sacred, so to speak, where we don't affect that afterwards. Other than that, most everything is fair game, so we could really have a lot of fun with it and make a lot of adjustments. Let's begin though, and we'll just give offsets to these arms. I'll start with the main arm, and looking at what we can do here and what we want to do, we're going to want this to grab. This is an FK system, so we need to look for our sacred keyframe here, which is 120. I don't want 120 to be disturbed. So I don't want to make any adjustments on that frame. I want to leave that be, but anything before or after it is fair game. So with something like the shoulder here, I could select that shoulder, and then just looking at this from 120, I could highlight all of its keyframes, even its first frame, and I could move those backwards 1 or 2 frames just to give some offset. So let's go ahead and move it back 2. I'll go 1, 2, and then I can come to the elbow. I can highlight all of its frames, and I can move those back 1 frame. Now, what that's going to do is all of the motions of the arm are going to be offset 1 frame from each other. So the shoulder will remove 1 frame first, the elbow will move 1 frame after, and then the wrist will be the one that maintains the true time. So we'll start to see that play out here. Now, you're really not going to notice this initially, but it's one of those things where if you did a comparison of before and after Play Blast, you would start to notice. 1 frame is pretty subtle, so you actually might not notice that at all. Let me find our sacred frame here at 120. I could move this forward 4 frames on the shoulder and 2 frames on the elbow here. And at this stage, we might start to notice it a bit more, where that shoulder is going to act first, followed by the elbow. I think that's a bit too much. I like the 1 and 1 offset, so I'm going to actually undo those. But I'll just add a slight offset in there so they're not perfectly on each other's keyframe. Now, when it comes to the other arm, we can offset it from this arm as well. What's cool about that arm is nothing is sacred. It doesn't grab anything, so we have the ability to move it essentially for the entire animation. And we could delay it from the first arm, which might be kind of interesting, by a frame. And in doing so, we'd actually be delaying it by 3 frames. So an example here is I could take the shoulder here, and we could offset these all together. I'll take the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, shift select the fingers, and I'll move them all back a single frame. So that way the shoulder is delaying behind this arm, and all of the poses of this arm are delaying behind this main arm. I could then come in and deselect the shoulder, and I could delay back the elbow. So the elbow is slightly slower than the arm and slightly slower than the previous arm. So you'll see now there's a bit of overlap between those. And then finally, I'll move down and deselect the elbow to the wrist, and I'll move that back 1 frame. And if I hit play now, this wrist is actually going to be offset. I think it's 4 frames from the other wrist. So there will actually be a lot of overlap here, or at least a fair amount. I do have to be careful though, because you'll see here, we're kind of losing the finger faster, but I'm okay with that since it's disappearing behind the mound. Lastly, I can offset the fingers from the fingers. So I could take the finger controls. I could keep them on par with the wrist, and this is an interesting thing. Since they're attached to the wrist, it doesn't really matter, but I could take the fingertips here, and I could offset those 1 frame, and that would give them a little bit of offset from the other fingers. I don't think we'll notice those ones too much, but you never know. So that entire arm is offset for this entire animation, which is kind of neat. And that will make it so it doesn't move at the same time. Very subtle, it's 1 frame difference, but it will add up over time. And since it's offset, the shoulder's offset, 4 frames from the elbow, like 5 frames from the other wrist, makes a pretty big difference. Now, as far as this arm goes, though, we do have the post 120 world, so that means after, right? So 120 is the grab. I could continue this where, for example, I make the shoulder move first. So I could move the shoulder forward once. I could keep the elbow where it's at, and then I could move the wrist back 1. So that way there's a 3 frame gap between them. And now there will be a little bit more overlapping action there. So the only frame that is sacred, so to speak, here is that 120 frame. That's when they all move at once for that arm, though, but not the other one. So we still have offsets. And then the rest of them, they have a little bit of offset to them. And we can continue to offset things like the fingers as well. The fingers, I kept them together with the last one on the wrist, but oh, right, they don't move on this one. So actually they do after the throw. So I could offset the fingers after the throw here for this one. So after 172, it looks like these ones would be fair game. So what I might do is take these base ones here and maybe delay them back 1, and then take these tip ones here and delay these back 2. So that way those aren't all moving at the same time. And that will go ahead and give us some offsets here. Now, this character is very simple, so we don't need to really do other offsets. We don't need to offset the head from anything or the body from anything. We could make the body move slightly faster than the arms, but it wouldn't make sense in the context of this character. So I think everything is pretty much good to go here. And that just adds a slightly higher level of polish to our animation, where everything's not moving simultaneously. It has a slight offset, even if it's very subtle and very fast. And like I mentioned, you can make that more dramatic, but you'll see the end result here, if we look at an area like our timeline, is we almost have a keyframe on every frame, except for these really big jumps, these big holds. And this is going to be a combination of the work we did in our moving holds, along with what we just did with offset. So we're basically offsetting those keyframes and staggering them. And at this point, we have a lot of life to our animation. So as a challenge, what I want you to do is go ahead and try adding in animation offsets to your animation. Just remember to keep that constraint area as a sacred area, because you don't want to try and offset the constraint with the wrist and all that stuff. And that should give you a nice looking polish to your animation. All right, so go ahead and give that a shot, see how it looks, and then we'll see where we can go from here.